Sponsored by the Dunleary Rattown Local Enterprise Office. You're listening to Business Eye on Dublin South FM.
I was actually just sitting here at my desk and I just feel like I haven't got up off this desk since last time I spoke to Simon. It's been a whole week. I think I've just changed my clothes a couple of times. I went for a walk, but it's like Groundhog Day. But we have to be happy as well. So I'm delighted. And I have to say I'm truly delighted. And I do get to speak to my friend and colleague, Simon, on a weekly basis. How are you, Simon?
I'm great. And yeah, I know what you mean, Joe. It feels like we were saying before, it feels like we're the only ones sitting in our car on the lay-by watching everybody going down the motorway. But I think everybody's feeling like that. So it's a strange time.
It's it's Groundhog. It's as I said to you there before. Okay, there's a bit of a lull, but what week are we in? Are we in the second week of January or the third week? And being honest, I am finding it difficult. And the reason why we're finding it difficult here is, we have small children. We've got homework, which really takes about 3-4 hours a day. The schools have been fantastic and they're very much interacting. But then we got smaller kids as well. We need to mind. You're trying to do work. My wife was trying to work. So it's I think this lockdown is going to be a little bit harder. But look, it's part of life. Tell us, Simon, who have we got today? Who do we have on today?
Well, we have two amazing guests. One originally from the States, who's currently here in Ireland, and somebody I've been following quite a lot on LinkedIn. So first up, we have Christian Espinosa. I hope I pronounced that okay, Christian. And so Christian is a U.S. Air Force veteran. He's founder and CEO of Alpine Security, which is a cybersecurity engineer, a certified high-performance coach. He's worked as a university professor, network and systems engineer, a white hat hacker, which I have no idea whether that's good or bad, a trainer, a consultant, an entrepreneur in the cybersecurity industry since 1993. And Christian's also a speaker, coach, trainer. And I would imagine from your website, you're very much into motivation and resilience and that. So welcome, Christian. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Simon.
And second up, we have Brian Kennedy, the guy I've been watching on LinkedIn a lot, and I love your post, Brian. So you're a manager and a mentor with 35 years experience leading large teams of people across several industries and jurisdictions to meet their business and personal goals. And you're a dedicated coach, mentor. Brian's also an advocate on well-being, which is right down our street for today, motivational speaker to corporate wellness programs and the importance of positive mental health in reaching personal and business goals. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun in chat today. It's a serious subject, but I think we'll look at it as lightly and as optimistically as we can.
Yeah, it's this week we're trying to focus on, motivation. How are people motivating their staff? How are we keeping people positive? And these are two perfect examples of keeping people motivated with the experience that both of you have. Especially with yourself, Brian, which I know you could sit down with Brian over a pint of Guinness and he could tell you some stories of when he used to work in the bank and now is retired. But tell us, guys, how are you finding the last couple of weeks within your own lifestyle?
Brian. I reckon I'm going to pick on Brian.
Well, I'm in a completely different space to you, Joe. I don't have young kids, okay? My kids are older. My wife's working away at home. I stopped full-time working last September. I've set up my bjkennomotivation and I'm doing the coaching. I guess for the first time last week, I said to my wife one day, is today Thursday? Okay, I really thought it was Wednesday. Never happened to me before in my life ever. Always knew where I was, but I was, oh my God, I've lost a day. How did that happen? Okay, and if that can happen when you're not going at 100 miles an hour, right, or you're trying to homeschool kids and whatever, you can see how this affects absolutely everybody. And I was I was completely shocked that could happen to me, to be perfectly honest, because I'm always very, very much in tune about what's going on. So yeah, that was just a bit of a shock.
It's funny, because we were just saying before that it feels like every day is kind of dribbling into the next day. I agree. I can't tell whether it's the week. I don't have that weekend feeling. I don't really know whether spring's coming or whether it's late, or it's just, and it's funny, like in 50 years' time when they write about this period, I wonder what they'll say about us. Well, I wonder if they'll say, God, they were unbelievably resilient, or whether they'll be saying that they didn't really cope that well. I wonder what they'll say about us in the future.
It's I'm quite the opposite. I came down the other day in my dressing gown, and made a cup of coffee and, put on a bacon butty and my wife says, "What are you doing?" And I says, "What do you mean, what am I doing?" She says, "You're in your dressing gown." I went, "Well, it's Sunday." And she goes, "No, it's Monday."
Yeah.
What about yourself, Christian?
Yeah, the last 2 weeks for me have been pretty challenging, and all the days have kind of blurred together. I just sold my company last month, so I'm transitioning a lot of the responsibility to the company that acquired us. And I have a book launch on Groundhog Day. You mentioned Groundhog Day. So my book is launching on Groundhog Day. So I'm kind of doing two jobs at once, trying to transition responsibility to the parent company while still being a managing director there, which causes me to shift my hours. So I'm working from like 2 in the afternoon here roughly till like 11 at night, on my day job. And then I'm trying to launch my book and work on that in the morning and around other schedules, such as on the weekend. So it's, but a little bit, everything's kind of blurred together recently.
Yeah.
So motivation, we were talking about that before. So Christian, how would you, given all these different things you're balancing and all these internal feelings you have, and nobody knows how long this is going to go on, if you were to describe to an alien how you stay motivated, how do you stay motivated?
For me, I keep my eye on the outcome I'm trying to achieve. And before I start an endeavor, I am certain that that's the path I want to go, and I'm willing to take the steps necessary. Because any journey you take or anything difficult that you try to accomplish, you're going to have obstacles. And if you don't think through your why before you start that journey, then the obstacles are going to chip away at your energy, and you're not going to have that motivation. So I make sure before I take on endeavor that I understand why I'm doing it from an emotional perspective, and I think, okay, this is going to be challenging probably at these areas. Am I willing to put the time and effort into it?
Wow. And what about yourself, Brian?
Very, very similar, I have to say. And that's something that I've done recently is to do some volunteering, to additionally give something more back. If that was helping people do their CVs or think about people that have been long-term unemployed, I've started to kind of help them in that field one day a week. And I suppose my daughter is coming to the end of her university studies. She's waiting for her results, and we've been looking at what she's written to try to get a job in different places. So I've been trying to kind of help her and mentor in that space. And look, Joe, I'm a runner. I'm still out there treading the road, doing 10 miles a night or 5 miles a night, or depending on how I do. And that kind of, if I feel down, I'll lace up my runners and I'll go for a run, and I listen to some positive podcasts. I listen to the news once a day. I get the numbers of people with COVID or whatever it is, but I don't dwell on it. I just listen to it once to keep myself, and then I go off and I either listen to music, but I try and keep as much positivity as I can in my day to day.
Brian, it's interesting there when you said about your daughter and helping them, people with CVs and everything, and it's something which is popping up now. Internship people go to offices, and it's to learn that environment or to upskill, and especially with new people now who have left, they're leaving cert and looking for jobs. It's going to be a really strange marketplace because they're not going into offices. They're not going to go, oh, you can work from home, because they don't know what to do. it's this whole thing it's like we were talking, Simon, before. It's like there's a holding pattern here, waiting. It's like, the Air Force, Christian, that the plane, you're waiting for the signal to get up before you take that plane off. I think that's what it is for the people who have just left school.
I know one chap, Joe, who's 6 months in a job and hasn't physically met anybody yet. They've had a few Zoom calls. His manager tells him what he's supposed to do. They send him emails about, process maps and things like that, but actually hasn't met anybody. And that's a first, I think, that you can say. And that's what most people are in that situation now. They're starting new jobs. And that's very difficult. It's a
real thing around well-being, isn't it? Because there's this whole thing of mentoring and how do organizations mentor young people, guys with white hair like me, or women like white hair like me. We're around to mentor young people, right? But we're not there. And then also, how do organizations retain their cohesiveness? So, and that feeds into the well-being, right? I mean, how do the emotional well-being of people, how is this going to how do you think this is panning out? How are people meant to feel well during this period? What do you think, Christian? How do people cope during this period?
Well, I think we're talking about a holding pattern, right? We could be in the same scenario like a year from now. So I think we need to kind of come to terms like this just may be the way it is for some time, and we don't know when the end of it is. For my organization, one of the things we've done to sort of because we've all worked remotely for 5 years. So we have implemented things like a virtual coffee, hour, where people show up. You don't have to show up. It's optional, but people just show up and chat about things that are not work related. So sort of build some cohesion and some rapport, and get my teammates to know each other in a, it's not a work environment. It is over Zoom, so it's not the same as in person. We would do it in person, obviously, if COVID wasn't here. But that's one thing we've done to sort of facilitate some, internal interactions with the team.
It's a great idea, the holding, that, as you say, the holding pattern, and it's having that coffee morning. So are companies out there, are they using these opportunities to actually speak to their staff outside work and ask them what the relationship, or is everyone just trying to squeeze an 8-day into a 4-day or a 4-hour or a 3-hour, get everything done so they can get away from this environment and just get back to being bored?
I did a talk a while ago, Joe, just to give you an idea. And in my talk, I threw out some statistical information from Bernardo's, where they spoke about, if you're working from home now and you're struggling and you think you're a bad parent and your kids are running riot and you feel bad because you can't give them the time to homeschool and you're beating yourself up, well, hey, surprise, surprise, you're not alone. There was statistical information, I don't have it here beside me, but that I was able to validate to some people that it's not just you. Everybody is struggling that has kids at this stage. And I got a communication afterwards from a lady who was at that talk, and she was a single mother. And she said, I want to say thank you very much. I felt somebody spoke up for me, because she was in an organization where she was still expected to do the numbers within 9 to 5. Nobody had taken account that she had a 2-year-old that needed to be looked after, that wasn't in the creche anymore. Okay. And no matter what she said to her leader, she wasn't getting the assistance or the help. Not that she wanted to do less work, but she wanted to be able to say, well, you know what, if I can't get it done between 9 and 5, I might be able to log on when the baby goes to bed at 8 o'clock and I'll get the rest of the work done. So some companies are not actually yet in that space to allow people to work that differently. Now, that could be the organization or it could be the individual manager. It's hard to say. But there's definitely some places doing better than others.
I agree, because I think, and we spoke about this before, Simon, on previous shows, that what it used to take us to do in a day can now take us 2 days to do. because we're fumbling around and we're learning on it. But being honest, as I always am, I fear that, are we starting to become omnibots, cyborgs? Are we just, sitting in these glass rooms and typing and looking at these screens? Yeah. And that's it. Like, that personal touch and that energy that we have, that energy that flows through us all as electrical energy for when we're meeting other people, that unwritten word, that sense, that's not there anymore. That's not there anymore.
You're so right. I mean, like, it reminds me of that scene from The Martian where Matt Damon's on Mars by himself. It feels like that. Like, we're all in these old little pods, but it's really visceral. Like this morning, I will not mention names, but I was talking to an HR director at a reputable company here, and she was dealing with some serious issues, and I got to a point, and she's a lot of stress, and it's all remote stuff. And I said, don't worry, you're not alone. I've been through the similar thing. And she broke down. Like, she broke down in tears on the phone. And yet she's not seemingly getting that support within her own business, that emotional, not being noticed to that extent, right? And so my question is, how do bosses and managers, what do they need to do to notice the suffering that people are going through? What do they need to do? Because we're all suffering. What are they missing? What do they need to do? I mean, Christian, how would you talk to senior directors and managers and say, really take notice?
I think the first thing is an awareness. We tend to look at the world through our own perspective. Like, my partner here has 3 kids, and like Brian said, she's trying to work, but the kids are at home now. So it's a lot different scenario for her. And her, she's trying to manage her time when she's trying to homeschool kids versus, a single individual. So most people try to just apply a blanket statement or philosophy to the remote workforce, where everyone has different constraints. And like with COVID, this is affecting everyone a little bit differently. So I think the awareness that, the single mother scenario or somebody taking care of somebody that's sick, they have more responsibilities than just a job. And then it's not like they don't want to work, but their workflow has been interrupted. So you need to have some flexibility on allowing them to work around, what they're dealing with at home, because it's not like they can go to the office and there's other people taking care of their children are at school anymore. Things have shifted. So the leaders need to shift as well with the changes. We can't hold on to the old paradigm when the world has shifted.
Yeah. And the leaders, I'm not sure whether it was Oracle or PwC that did a recent survey, but I know that 70% of CEOs said that 2020 was the most difficult year that they've managed in. Okay. And 60% of them then said that they had struggled with their mental health. Now, if you have the C-level executives in an organization struggling like that, the people in the coalface down in the trenches, okay, where things are not going right for customers and they're taking it in the neck 10 times a day, are getting that by 5. Okay. Now, that's where the organizations, in my view, need to change. If you're still managing your people today the way you were before COVID-19, I can guarantee that you're going to have a problem. If your wellness program that you've set up, which is normally around, we'll say, try to train people about resilience, the usual, managing change, stress. Okay, if that's the same as it was before COVID, that it was just something that they put up online, and if you're feeling bad, go in and click on that, and they're definitely heading for a huge problem by the end of the year.
Which, it brings up a question: Are we judging people more quickly? Like, if we're with ourselves, like where we're interacting and we're speaking to other companies, especially if you're buying stuff online with organizations, and if their customer service isn't up to scratch, or are we judging more? Are we starting to complain a little bit more because companies are a lot slower getting back to us, even though we know it takes, personally ourselves, we know it takes longer to get work done? and the skill sets that we, as you said, Brian, the skill sets we used to have, what are the new skill sets that people need to have, and what will colleges need to teach moving forward? For being honest, it's a new world. We will never go back to the way it was, because we've all, even if we've all been scarred of what's happened over the last 2 years, what is the new education, the new way moving forward?
Do you mean for leaders, or leaders,
yeah,
executives,
leaders,
or just workers as a, you know?
Leaders and executives. I'll put that up to both of you.
Yeah, I think leaders and executives need to, and I write about this in my book. I have 7 steps in there where I talk about awareness. So you have to have your self-awareness, awareness of your employees and what they're dealing with, their perspective, their model of the world, because everyone looks at things a little bit differently. And another key thing is empathy. We're all connected at a human level, and we all share struggles, but we seem to focus only on the differences, and that's partly because of the media and the news and everything else. But at a human level, we all have the same struggles, and we all want to be appreciated and understood and do a great job. And we want to, show that we're valuable and can impact our organization. So if leaders, can look at their personnel through the lens of some empathy and awareness that, they may have a different struggle, then I think that would go a long way, as well as communication. Well, communication is one of the fundamental things that from a society and from a leadership, especially in my career field, which is cybersecurity, communication is often like the last thing considered. But when you're working remotely, it's much more challenging, because you can't, like Joe said, you can't feel the energy or the vibe from the room. So having better communication skills is extremely important. And I'm a believer in that the meaning of communication is response you get. So that puts ownership on you as a leader. So if you're communicating to your team something and they're not understanding it, they're not getting it, they're not doing it, they're going in a different direction than you suggested, then that is your responsibility to change how you're communicating to them.
Yeah. And Christian, would you say you need to have a couple of different ways to communicate, or do you just need to make sure that your communication is understood by the people? Because you hear people talking about, Brian's a leader and he's great and he knows how to talk to Mary and Johnny and Paddy because they've all got different types of personalities. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, I shouldn't, as a good leader, I should be able to communicate with these people using my personality and a good way of dealing with people to deliver the same message, but to make sure that they understand what's actually being told. Would you agree with that, as opposed to kind of giving the same message 10 different ways?
I agree with that to some degree. The challenge is, from an awareness perspective, everyone is looking at the world through their own lens. So when you communicate the same thing to 2 different people, it's going to be received differently. So not to say it won't be received and understood, but you just have to remember and take a step back. Like, if I communicate this to Sally, but she's looking at the world through a fear-based lens, and I communicate it to Bob, and Bob is looking at the world through an abundance-based lens, then the same message is going to be received drastically differently.
Yeah. So to try and make sure that they understand that. And then, Joe, to you and Simon, I would say, you have all these different millennials. What am I? Gen X now, I think, is what or a boomer, I think, is what people would tell me I am. Okay, you have Gen X and you have Gen Y. Okay, and all what I found in the last 5 years was I was beginning to try to kind of figure out who was who, because depending on who was who would determine how I felt that they would react when I was doing, a progressive one-to-one with them. Okay. And they came to the business with different perspective. They expected different things from the business because of their age and because of the different, whatever, like a Gen X, a Gen Y person will come and expect an awful lot more, I believe, from the organization that they're going to work from, and actually won't be afraid to tell a manager, hey, you know what, I think you're bad at your job. Which would be a huge shock to somebody of my vintage if somebody said that to me. But hey, you'd have to be open to take the feedback. So to me,
Brian,
yeah.
I understand, and you're right there, because the younger generation want purpose, where we grew up materialistic and wanted money.
Yeah.
And there is the biggest question that everybody asks is, what is my purpose? So the different, I've said this hundreds of times before, we're okay because we all grew up being bored. We couldn't switch a TV until 6 o'clock in the evening. The national anthem played at night and we slept for 8 hours. Now it's on all the time. So on Saturdays we were bored out of our being. Instant gratification didn't exist. Natural law was everything took time. Okay. What do the people want now, or how do we communicate with people? And we're just going to take a quick ad break, but I just want to leave this with you, right? If you really want to understand other people, and Christian, just as with you in your book as well, understand yourself first, and that is the secret to success of dealing with other people. We'll take a quick break.
You're listening to Business Eye, sponsored by your local enterprise office in Dunleary Rathdown. Together, we're making it happen.
Before the break, I said to the guys that, you really got to know yourself or understand yourself before you get to really know other people. And they all agreed. And I'd like, maybe Christian to open up and what are your thoughts about this?
I think that's spot on, Joe. In my book and through my experience, I talk a lot about awareness, and you have to have the self-awareness before you can be aware of anyone else or what they're doing. And I also talk about acknowledgement. I think acknowledgement is extremely important as a leader, and it has to start with self-acknowledgement. And I used to be guilty of not ever acknowledging myself. I would never pat myself on the back and just be on to the next thing. So I never took a step back and thought, you know what, I actually accomplished a lot of things and gave myself some acknowledgement or appreciation. But if you can't do that for yourself, you're going to have a hard time recognizing it for people that work with you. Yeah. So I think it's important to have the self-awareness and the self-acknowledgement. Yeah, absolutely.
Simon, to you on that.
Absolutely, and the way I'd like to pivot this a bit, we mentioned it during the break, was about sensitivity, and so the old way of working, the very male, macho, egotistical, hierarchical way of working. Let's face it, over the last year we've been in this circuit breaker, and the whole world has witnessed mainly middle-aged or old male politicians getting it wrong and younger female politicians getting it right. We've also witnessed that, those companies who are much more balanced around reputation and risk and not just revenue are doing well in the stock market. So it's clear, right? It's empirically proven now that if you're more sensitive and aware and situationally aware and emotionally smart, you're going to succeed, and if you're not, you're going to fall behind. So the question I would have is, to what extent do you think businesses will really pick up on this, or do you think some of them will revert back to type after this?
I think if I can jump in there, I think what you find now is more and more companies coming out explaining what their purpose is. Okay, I never really heard people talk. They talked about values, but they never really talked about their purpose, okay? But now they talk about their purpose and their values. And the challenges that they're going to have in the next 2 years, for me personally, is that when they go and hire people and they put something in a job description and they say what the company stands for, okay? And the person goes into that job and suddenly they find out that they look at the leaders and the leaders are not walking the talk, and the values are not really the values of the company, that it's all lip service, he will leave, okay? And you can put as many wellness programs together as you like, okay? You can review your wellness programs and your data around, your satisfaction surveys and put a plan in place. But unless you actually educate the leaders, Simon, as you said, to be sensitive, to be more empathetic with people. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't talk to somebody about a lack of performance, but you do it in a way you can explain it. And I don't mean this, you know the old, and Christian probably knows this as well as a CEO, the old, you bring someone into a room and you give them the SH1T sandwich, and you want to give them a little bit of positive, but everybody knows there's a big but coming at the end of it. You can't, if you're going to give somebody 5 negative things, you can't just give them one positive thing, right? So to me, it's fine-tuning all that training that we would have got years ago going forward to make sure that the managers are actually dealing with people correctly. And if that means that you're struggling and you're a father or a husband or a wife or somebody, and you've got a 2-year-old kid at home, I, as a leader, should know you have a 2-year-old kid at home, and I give you a break because that kid needs to be looked after. The numbers suffer, right? Because look, you can have a leader. I remember reading something before that you can have leaders that get to be leaders because of results. Okay, they hit everything on the nail. The numbers are fantastic. They become a leader because people see them, they follow them. They believe that, oh yeah, I think he's a good guy or a good woman, I'll go and follow her. But actually, it's the person who can be both of that and people admire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is the person who will make a really good leader, because they are empathetic, sympathetic, understand what's going on, and people can come and talk to them and tell them, you know what, I'm struggling, I need a break here.
So
I think the purpose. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
So go on, Christian, go on.
Oh, I think what Brian said about purpose for the organization and the organization's reason for being is extremely important, because in my organization, I used to hire people based on their technical skills, like above all. And then I shifted my hiring process to look at people that were aligned with our purpose and our core values and our mission before I even considered their technical skills. So that really reduced the friction and reduced problems with people in my organization. And the other shift I think a lot of leaders need to have is the way you treat your employees matters, and it matters more than anything else. There's always a lot of focus on clients and customers. Many companies will say we're customer focused, but they ignore the employees. You need to be employee focused, because if your employees feel appreciated, they're happy, their environment's thriving, they enjoy going to work, they're going to treat the customers better anyway. So the paradigm needs to shift from customer focused to employee or team focused.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we now in a generation of soft skills? Are we in that sort of generation where, and like you said, the fittest survived, the best of the best of all those movies that we watched of Wall Street and, the trudging up the hill, have they all kind of now put the brake put on them, and it's soft skills? And another part as well, which it's just triggering with me, is strengths and weaknesses. When we've all learned all our life to build on our strengths and not focus on our weaknesses, what if your strengths are of the old way and you can't cope, or a manager and executive can't cope in this new way because there are weaknesses? Are we turning everything up on a dime?
I think we are. Soft skills to me, or people skills, are actually more difficult to learn than hard skills or technical skills in my industry. And one of the things we have to look at with a lot of technical jobs, since I work in cybersecurity, is there's artificial intelligence. And if you only have technical skills and you can do procedural work technically, there's a high chance that your job will be outsourced in the future to AI. Whereas if you have the soft skills and the empathy, and you can communicate with people, you can understand where they're coming from, look at their perspective, build a connection, build rapport, that's going to be much more valuable in the future.
Yeah.
I might turn a little bit and then direct it to Brian. So I've been involved in some stuff in the States, and instead of calling it soft skills, we're calling it power skills, right? So imagine a world where things like diversity and gender balance, empathetic communications, remote cohesive management, and trust-based cultural cohesion actually increased brand equity and profitability. Imagine if you could prove they did. I would imagine companies would jump on this, right? So it just needs to be determined. What do you think about that, Brian? It's a mindset flip.
Yeah, and look, I haven't worked in America, but I've managed 8 European countries for an American company, and I've seen the different cultures and the way the different cultures work. I think the soft skills are the most important thing going forward. I think when people are trying to hire even graduates now, they're looking at the soft skills that the graduates can bring to the office. As Christian said, you're looking for somebody with the tech skills. Yeah, that's the first thing. The second thing is, okay, well, are they going to fit into the team? Can they communicate? Now, they're not new things, by the way, Simon. You know that. We would have interviewed people for that years ago, and you'd kind of go, okay, if somebody came in there, they were so, if they were so much of a bookworm, God love the person, they probably didn't get the job because the person said, well, they're just going to come in and sit in the corner and they won't talk to anybody and they'd be no good, which is not the right thing to do. So I think the soft skills now are coming more and more into play. But you can't forget the results-based thing, because if you don't get the results, then, obviously. But I think customers will, what was I going to say? Trying to say this, companies will tell you that they have the customers at the heart of everything that they do. Okay, and what Christian said there is exactly right. You have to try now and put in, what the employees are also now at the heart of everything that we do. There was a survey done a while ago, again, about AI. Christian, you might have seen it, I don't know, but I think it was 90% of employees said, with regard to stress, they would rather talk to a bot about stress, right, than their manager. And I think that's just like very sad. That's very sad to hear. But
I think my wife would rather talk to a bot than me half the
time. Yeah. But look, soft skills. To me, in the old days, you would go into a room, you would receive some training about the culture of the organization, what was expected of you, how they wanted you to interact with people. They would tell you about the computer system. They would tell you about the different areas of the bank. There's very, very little of that going on today. And what I would say is, in the future, I would see more of that with the use of AI will be done, because PwC again did some kind of a survey a while ago that said people will, if you train somebody using AI, they'd be 4 times more productive than they would be if they were trained in a room with a human. And by the way, you get more of a return on your investment as an organization. And I kind of struggle with some of those reports that come out.
Here's something I just want to throw out. Some people were going into their workplace and they were interacting with toxicity, a bully, someone, I've been there when in the past, when I've gone into an office and I've nearly vomited before I've gone in because of the someone in a higher level who was toxic. Okay. And so I can relate to that. This was a very long time ago. So young people that were going in are people in their 40s or 50s even now today who were going into an office that had this environment. What's going on at the moment, that everyone is working in a bubble, that must be a relief to them that they're not interacting with those toxic people within the organization as well. Would you agree with me on that or disagree?
I think they're still interacting with the people. It's just like this, right? Through a Zoom session. And the energy, is different because you're not around that person at the office. So you may not feel the toxic culture as much, but you still have to deal with it in some capacity. And that's something that like in my industry, it's almost tolerated. These I like to say kiss up and kick down leaders. It's almost tolerated because there's this notion that if you have a high IQ, it's acceptable to have a low EQ or poor people skills. And I think there needs to be a shift because toxic cultures are because of leadership in senior leadership. It all starts at the top. So the leaders have to be aware and be willing to train the person that's a bully or terminate them and get rid of them, basically.
What about introverts? Is this easier? Because I've spoken to a few and they're saying it seems less of a gut-wrenching thing to have to deal with bosses or stakeholders on a laptop than it does to actually meet them face to face. So it seems to suit introverts. Brian, you seem to be agreeing.
The big worry, I think, for a lot of companies going forward is that the more they do remote working, the more introverts are going to apply for the jobs. And they're going to end up with a whole pile of introverts that don't want to talk to anybody. And when they go on a Zoom call like this, you won't see their picture because they won't turn their camera on, right?
Yeah.
So, that's a worry. But I agree with Christian. I think that people are still interacting with these bullies. I think that there are still bullies out there that are giving people a very tough time. I think that the people who those bullies report to as you go further up the line know that those people are being bullies, but because they're producing results, they turn a blind eye to it. And I think, again, until everybody has the confidence to, number one, call that out, and number two, in the employee survey that's done, that they put their anecdotal information in, nothing's going to be done about it.
So do you think that bosses and leaders need to be more assertive? So assertive, there's passive, there's aggressive, and there's assertive. And assertive is saying you what you want in a way that's respectful of others. Is what you're saying that leaders need to be more assertive to those toxic people? What do you think? What do you think, Christian?
I think they need to have the awareness that most of the bullies are probably insecure in some form, and it's manifesting through bullying, and they've probably been bullied before. So if you have some awareness of that person's model of the world, it makes you more equipped to have a conversation with them versus just approaching it like from an aggressive perspective, like I'm going to confront the bully by being a bully myself. That doesn't really help.
Yeah.
So, but being able to understand where they're coming from, not that it's justified where they're coming from, but the understanding is important so you can approach it from a perspective of being able to help the situation or move them forward. And if they're unable to move forward, though, as a leader, and I struggle with this as well, because I like to believe in ownership, and part of ownership is being able to solve problems for me. And if I have a toxic person that I am trying to coach or mentor to become, and I've had this happen in the past, to become less toxic, part of the ownership is on them as well. So we can approach them and try to shift them from being a bully, but at some point, if they're not moving or they're not willing to, we have to let them go as soon as possible.
I think there's a difference, and we have to be careful in a relationship that is broken down between a person and their line manager and a bully. Okay, so a person whose relationship has completely broken down because every time they talk to their manager, they're getting negative feedback. They're constantly being told, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. And they're not being told anything about the fantastic things that they've done. And let's face it, nobody goes to work to do a bad job, right? Okay, so there's a difference. And you can actually turn around and sit down and say, okay, I need to sit down with Joe and have a chat with Joe about our interactions, and an honest to God, face to face, listen, this is how I'm feeling. Every time I talk to you, you tell me a negative thing. It's a bit like if you go and talk to your child and you want to say something and the child goes, don't stop that, don't tell me that now, right? Because they feel that there's that negative, you're just going to be negative, right?
Yeah.
So you can work on that and you can fix that, and you don't have to sit in the car park wondering will you go into work that day because of the environment. You can try and do something. But the bully, on the other hand, is the person who doesn't listen. Okay, makes life hell for the person who's not empathetic or sympathetic at all, and just wants to know about the numbers. And usually you will find that there'll be a high turnover of staff in those areas of the business. There'll be a high level of sickness. And look, we all know if you're going to go out of work sick, you're going to tell the doctor, don't put stress on my sick thingy, right? And therefore now it's probably a little bit more difficult under GDPR for the organization to identify, well, actually, do we have a toxic environment? Is it because everybody's out with stress? How are we going to address it, you know?
Yeah, it's not putting down stress. Could you put COVID on that, please?
Yeah.
You've had COVID 10 times this year.
2 weeks off,
Yeah. I just had a sense. Imagine if we could time capsule this conversation, right? And if we could listen to this in 20 years' time, I wonder how far away from where we're going to pan out we are. It'd be interesting to time, you know what I mean? It'd be very interesting to see how this pans out.
Well, we'll put this on a CD and we'll bury it in the time capsule out the back.
Put it in your back garden, Joe.
Lads, we've got about 5 minutes left, and you know, the one I want to just ask our two guests one question. What advice can you give people at the moment so they can feel emotionally involved in their company and, you know, being less stressed with everyone in the organization as well?
The advice I would give is to make sure someone understands their why. Like, there's an exercise called the 7 levels deep exercise that really gets down to like why you want to do something. And one of the biggest things I've encountered, and this is because of my industry, in cybersecurity, a lot of people get into the career field for money and stability, but they're really not aligned with it. So they're constantly frustrated. And this is where aligning with what you want to do in life, or what you feel like it's your purpose to your organization would help you immensely through your career. So I think taking that step back and figuring out, from an emotional standpoint, your why should be emotional, not just intellectual. What do I really want to do in my life, and what do I connect with? And then find an employer or an organization that is in alignment with you.
I 100% agree, Joe. And I also think that people should think a little bit deeper about the outcome of what they do in the company. Okay, so for me, if I issued $1 billion last year in lending in mortgages in the institution I worked for, okay, I would have to say, do you know what? If that was 200,000 mortgages, I have allowed families to buy their dream home, to build dreams for their families for the future, right? I'm doing more than just giving somebody a mortgage. I'm helping them realize their dream to be able to move into the next 20 years. And when I sit down and I realize that, it makes me a lot happier about my purpose and the reason why I'm working in the company and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I try to get that across to the people who are working in the teams as well.
Brian, if someone wants to reach out to you, where can they connect?
You get me on LinkedIn, or you can have a look at my bjkennomotivation.com website. Thanks,
Christian, yourself?
Yeah, my website, christianespinosa.com, or I'm on most of the main social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, any of those.
And when's your book out?
February 2nd, Groundhog Day.
Yeah,
Cool.
Let us know on that. Let us know.
Yeah.
Will do. Thank you.
Simon, what's the plans for the weekend in your 5K radius?
Walk in the 5K radius and just take it easy. And one thing I just wanted to add was that, we come into the world by ourselves, we go out by ourselves. So for me, kind of my purpose is to learn what I can and share it and help I'll earn money to it, but help as many people as I can before I leave this world. And I've only just figured that out at the age of 53. So if you think you're alone in this world, you're not. We're here to help each other. And you can make money by doing that, but in a good, genuine way. So that's how I'll leave.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's when you realize that you do it to honestly help and you're not doing it for a buck.
Yep.
You know, and we have to be smart as well, that you're not helping everybody and not getting a buck either.
Yeah.
And the real thing is, it's not helping people that don't want to be helped, because that's where you're wasting your time on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, on that note, guys, I want to say thank you to our guests, and again to my co-host Simon. A great chat this week, guys. Filled me up with actually just nice to be talking to people.
Yeah.
I can say, let's call ourselves the 4 wise men. There we go. You know, I'll be the odd one now because I don't have grey hair yet. That's it on it. Thank you, folks. So listen, I hope everyone does have a safe weekend. I hope that you are good to yourselves. It's very important to be kind to yourself and kind to others. So until next week, have a super weekend. And I think myself and Simon, we're going to talk about lockdown next week and how that is affecting small businesses. Until then, take care and God bless.
You're listening to Business Eye, sponsored by your local enterprise office in Dunleary Rathdown. Together, we're making it happen.